Good morning, everyone. David Atkins, Target Individual. Today I'm going to finish the other video, and this is going to be some tips for Target Individual, and also going into what they do and how to sort of throw it off, especially remote neural networks. I've touched on it before. Feel like it's important to touch on it again because repetition will help you remember this stuff. Okay, but first I'm going to start out with a Bible verse, and it's coming from Psalms 9, 9, and 10. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in the times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you. For you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. My bad. Okay, so I'm just going to go right into the information, and then I'll tell you a little about what's going on with me at the end of the video. Okay, spontaneity. Never follow a set pattern of conduct. Always change your behavior every day at a moment's notice. Do this when you're quickly, not slowly, on the move, as it is more difficult for the remote neural system to monitor your thoughts while you're in rapid motion. If you decide to go to a grocery store, go to a convenience store instead. Change it up every day, but don't do the same thing over and over, as it established that set pattern of conduct. Remember, they are trying to alter your daily motives and emotional perceptions. The remote neural monitoring system is designed to provoke you emotionally so they can generate response statistics, which the system will use to determine how to interpret and link descriptions with data captured about your memory references. This is why they are constantly trying to keep you talking, or constantly stopping you and asking you for directions, etc. So always ignore prolonged random encounters with people you don't know. You're not being rude, just refusing to allow them to manipulate you. Once they have consistent statistics, the system will use the previous choice reference and inject them in your subconscious thought during normal activity, which is also referred to as impulse injections, to convince you that the response was your own and influence you to complete or describe the reference by making the appropriate verbalizing or performing a related action, which is known as verification. You can fight or control this if you learn to defeat these memory attacks by learning to read active memory. Once they see what you respond to emotionally, intellectually, they will fabricate conversational or situational scenarios, street theater, based on events or topics they know will capture your attention. For example, if you're a football fan, they will talk about your favorite team or wear a t-shirt or a hat with your favorite football team's emblem. So they constantly wear it, and you might say, and this dude said they do this with me, as he's an Alabama fan. So they constantly wear Alabama shirts, hats, pretending to be Alabama fans or from Alabama in order to try to stimulate him towards talking with them and keep him talking. And this is why the perps keep you talking for so long, not just to aggravate you, but to provoke you in an emotional response so they can map out your thought process in order to subsequently inject impulses, etc., and control your mind. This is why the feds try to get people close to you. Example given by approaching you, befriending you with a hot girl, a handsome guy, so-called honey traps. Here's how you stop that from happening. Ignore all prolonged random encounters with strangers you don't know and be spontaneous. This same remote neural attack can be used to disrupt your speech if the attackers decide to prevent you from discussing a specific topic or repeating a given word. The system can be configured to disrupt your recollection when formulating a related statement or inject gibberish, triggered substitution while you're attempting to speak. The goal of these attacks appear to be threefold: censorship, memory management, and direct behavior control. These people are not concerned with legal constraints or any particular acceptable way of life. They simply use anything you enjoy, hate, or appreciate to abuse you regardless of your behavior, so that if they give you a compliment, realize they're only doing it to see how you respond when they turn around to negate it and torture you nightly. If you keep a constant handle on your state of activity as well as your situational perception, you will recognize conflicting impulses. And although it is possible for the system to overpower your impulses, if you understand the attacks, you'll be able to recognize the physical changes resulting from these powerful impulses, and should prompt you to reevaluate. This should prompt you to reevaluate your current state. Unless you've been tortured to near incoherency, you should be able to fight the system's influences. These remote neural attacks are most effective when you're stepping through sequence tasks, so try to avoid zoning on your activities. How? By changing your actions and activities randomly and constantly at the speed of thought. Don't always plan out or think your daily itinerary if you don't have to. Just do it. Remote neural manipulation is accomplished via their system's ability to interpret your thoughts and is wholly dependent on its ability to predict and influence your reference choices or impulse sequencing during the thought composition. The system maps patterns with impulses and identifiers or evoked potentials and uses statistical data about your composition habits to predict how you will think or act. Excuse me. As you begin to formulate thoughts or prepare to act, the system's ability to define and map these references intelligibly depends on your cooperation or ignorance and the attacker's ability to make sense of what they see visually or what they can guess based on your past activity. Okay, we're moving on to number 3, quenching. They will constantly run you through a verification routine where the system probes you for a particular set of responses repeatedly in order to establish a pattern. If you're interacting and countering these probes, the operator will vary the routine in an attempt to verify via different methods. Once the system verifies the selected responses, they will be used in the next wave of harassment routines. The process is endless, and you will see the effects clearly if you are consistently defeating the system. If you're not defeating the remote neural system, then you will not see or notice the effects. The way to defeat the remote neural system is by quenching. You quench remote neural monitoring by interacting with and countering their tactics. None of what these people are collecting could ever be used in a case against you. Every piece of information collected by their system can be considered falsified or fabricated because the system is designed to continuously provide suggestions according to data which has been previously collected about your current activity, and the accuracy of reference definitions is extremely low since the attackers really don't care about the truth, and the system will fabricate statements or imagery while they're abusing you. The fabrications are generally the result of misinterpretation of references and emotional indicators, as well as distortion of injection feedback, in addition to false entries added manually by the attackers as a result of their inability to understand what they're viewing or their malintent. There is no reliable way for the attackers to determine what is true, even if they try to apply their observations to aforementioned indicators. An attempt to prove guilt with their system would be equivalent to a cop dropping a gun at a crime scene and claiming it to belong to some individual who happened to be passing by, random and falsified. There's no legal application for the system or anything generated by it. They will only capture what they want to abuse you with, and when they decide to censor your thoughts, they will force you into abusive or incoherent thought pattern using the injection and blocking methods mentioned above. For example, when you experience sudden severe aggression and agitation, it is the perps, not you, and it is part and parcel mind control. They injected those impulses. Remember, they want to keep you constantly thinking about them. You can limit and counter this effect by learning to read memory while blocking their system. However, it does take quite a bit of skill and self-awareness. This is known as redirection. And now I'm on redirection. Redirection is simple. When the remote neural attack happens, the impulses and thoughts are introduced by your mind by strong urge, high-frequency attacks, or slight motivation, low-frequency attack. Just change your thread of thought. This hinders integration completion between your brain and the remote neural system. You do this by establishing what is known as a working reference. The Bible says whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Philippians 4:8. You can thwart their R&M attacks by establishing a working reference each time they attempt to inject impulses and thoughts in your brain. This is done by recognizing something in life that makes you very happy, then refocusing or redirecting back to that happy experience in life each time you're attacked through R&M. If you can do this each day, their attacks will be simply be an annoyance to you as you can work around it. But it will still hinder performance tremendously as you'll be forced to test and validate memory constantly, and the physical sensations of the system radiating your brain will be both irritating and distracting. Note that these attacks can be performed successfully at lower intensities, and you may initially only notice them if you are frequently being tested at higher intensities. Torture. And understanding memory attacks, blocking your real memories and injecting false memories and impulses are key, because if you do not recognize modification of your active memory, the system will cause you to briefly lose time perception, which may be enough procedural, functional disorientation to influence you to respond to an injected impulse. Forced speech, for example. It is possible for the system to influence you to speak unwillingly, or very worse, without you knowing it. For example, if you're susceptible to the system's influences, you may not realize that it's frequently or constantly influencing you to make minor choices. These motivational impulses can also be used to influence you in a manner that would give you the desire to speak And I emphasize desire because you need to understand that these impulses will only make you feel the urge at higher levels set by the attackers or basic motivation at baseline levels to perform the task it's influencing you to do. Now, in combination with its motivation to speak, the system uses past references to direct you. For example, your personal memory of turning to speak to your wife and the associated impulse. When you react to this influence, the system will block your working memory while streaming the desired output, which will result in you making one or more statements under the system's control. They will test you on this frequently with word substitution. And if you can learn to control this in thought, then you can control it while speaking. But you must learn to multitask constantly and to read memory. If you do not have a working reference to return to after the force-to-speech attack, it is possible that you will have no recollection of making the statement. If you have a hard time understanding how remote neural monitoring works, just think of how a lie detector works. In theory, remote neural monitoring functions in a similar manner to a lie detector by measuring physiological responses emitted by the body. In remote neural monitoring, it is those physiological responses emitted via electromagnetic impulses by the brain. As you learn to defeat predictive capabilities of the system, quenching, redirection, multitasking, spontaneity, their attempts to restrict your reference choices will become increasingly evident, and you will begin to perceive what I describe as functional duality. It might also be described as focal duality within your working memory. The PERP system prediction error rate will dramatically increase, and its attempts to predict your thoughts or intentions will become humorous, if not simply annoying. Easier said than done, though. Thought-triggered attacks. Seeing the relationship between your memory references and the system outputs, which can be a specific directed energy attack, an audible forced speech sequence, it's critical to understand how to control and ultimately defeat thought-triggered attacks, in addition to preventing the attackers from deceiving you with cognitive magic tricks. You should be able to redirect the system during formulation, collecting data by reading your mind, or prevent predictive interpretation of data from injected thoughts and impulses altogether. But when you learn to stop integration, realize the system will be waiting for completion and will probe you for a response. It will begin to inject again, and if you attempt to ignore it, unless you have extremely high memory skill and have learned the quenching technique, redirection may be the easiest option. They will also abuse you in every way possible to convince you they're in control, when you will be able to see clearly they are nothing more than idiots who need to spend more time studying the systems they are abusing people with. If the system's suggestions are not acceptable to you, and they won't be if you're consistently blocking and redirecting it, then this will result in you making a continuous effort to counter the imposition of thoughts and impulses while contrasting your working state to maintain active focus. Although by cooperating, allowing the system to interpret and define your daily activity, you may find that suggestions become more tolerable, as the system is designed to mimic your normal cognitive behavior. I would recommend not allowing this, as you will tend to more readily accept the system influence. And the purpose of the system's influencing you in this manner is to give the attackers the ability to restrict you at will and allow them to deceive or manipulate you subconsciously. You can only counter these restrictions if you're able to contrast the system's influence from your own willful activity. Everyone who's hearing B2K is being monitored in this manner and being influenced in this way as well. The phrases you're hearing should be related to information captured during the silent monitoring period and will eventually be used as a foundation for your endless verbal harassment. What they do is a game of deception and manipulation, nothing more. Do not accept anything they say as truth, and do not acknowledge anything the system interrogates you about as truth. The system will take random bits of anything it captures through your senses and fabricate stories which they will use to harass and interrogate you with no intention other than distract and torture you into submission to the system's influence. If you learn to defeat the remote neural memory and thought processes attacks, you can render remote neural monitoring useless or manipulate it to your advantage. Your advantage would be to be able to document and verify it's happening in the court of law. People who take a stand and try to oppose this evil are labeled as dissidents and are punished or summarily killed. Many are victimized or being falsely misdiagnosed with a mental illness, so that they're not taken seriously, pushed to the margins of society altogether, removed from society, or their credibility destroyed so no one will believe them. This is why torture is designed to be so brutal. Precisely, no one will believe it's happening. Their whole lives are completely destroyed because it somehow became a threat to our Orwellian society. As bad it is, it will only get worse. Mind control will soon permeate permeate every facet of our society. They achieve this by decoding electromagnetic emissions of the brain into actual thought patterns. Once those patterns are identified, they are used in varied and repeated harassment, torture of the targeted individual. The mental images of the brain can actually be seen through this window into the soul. Images, sounds, and other sequences, aromas can be decoded into the human brain. They do this. Okay, these electromagnetic impulses are sent into the brain via impulse injections to trigger evoke potentials for the purpose of verification. This generates sounds, images, aromas, and via the neuronal circuits. Essentially, they've turned the brain into a visual, verbal, and auditive communication system. For example, synthetic telepathy is a denomination of DARPA that uses electronic brain-to-brain or brain-to-computer interfaces by touching the arm of another person, shaking their hand, or just by touching the arm of another person or shaking their hand, a CIA operative can communicate via synthetic telepathy to another operative without ever saying a word, as those neural circuits in the hand or arm travel the same pathways to the brain. This takes very special software and usually involves direct or remote contact with the human anatomy. It's very similar to cell phone technology and basically amounts to receiving a cell phone call in your head. A computer multiplexer routes the signal through microwave towers, then onto a receiver. The receiver is located with pinpoint accuracy and traced to a few feet of its actual location. However, the receiver is not a cell phone, it's a human mind. Right now, they're able to clone the human mind by downloading one's entire persona and psyche into a computer database. This technology is also being used by British intelligence agencies, known inside as M16 circles as Project Soulcatcher. This is achieved through transcranial stimulation via directed energy weapon radiation and bioelectric R&D. Basically, the NSA maps your brain, then ties you to a supercomputer, which downloads your information back into a database, monitors all electromagnetic activity of your brain 24/7 for life until the day of your death. This transcranial brain stimulation is also used by the military with brain-to-computer interfaces, such as those used by pilots with the new F-35 stealth aircraft. NSA agents use this technology to covertly debilitate people using direct energy weapons, such as microwaves, to slowly degrade their minds or internal organs until they die or become incapacitated. They've done this to people for years. This paradigm, okay. All right, and it's over. And he said, Plato once said, well, I'm going to tell you what he's describing happening. He said, they have done this to me continue for years. NSA, CIA paradigm against me had me falsely misdiagnosed with a mental illness, which doctors changed quickly to delusional disorder. Since then, they've targeted my brain as well as other internal organs with electromagnetic low-frequency waves so that my brain slowly deteriorates, and I've developed dementia or some neurological disease. Then they will say I was mentally ill. But there's a big difference between mental illness and mental injury. They have no fear of God, no fear of man. The law means nothing to them and has no meaning for those they slowly torture and kill, because the law will not help those people. The law only works where it can be applied. Plato once said, all laws are meaningless because good people will always keep them and evil people will always find a way around them. God bless y'all. What's been going on with me is every time I lay down, my direct energy attacks get worse. So it's keeping me from getting sleep. So when I lay down, I start getting the vibrations and direct energy attacks intensify. So that happens whether I'm on a bed, couch, and if I lay on the floor, 10 times worse. So anyway, I do find though, sometimes if I'm getting hit and I try to multitask and do several things at once, it helps tremendously. God bless y'all. Stay vigilant and remember, man, we're in this together. Isolation. The reason I want to keep you isolated, like I said in one of my other videos, is it makes us more effective. If you're constantly going out doing stuff with family and friends, it's hard for them to get the system to lock onto you. So they keep you isolated. That's one reason for isolation. There's many reasons for it, but one reason is, if you're isolated, you're not as active as, if you got a bunch of friends and you're going out every night doing different stuff with friends, it's keeping your mind busy. It's hard to lock onto you and make these weapons even more effective. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, God bless y'all. Y'all have a good day, and I will have another video out in a couple of days.